Hi, it's Sam here from samplelibraryreview.com, and I'm really excited to be bringing you a review of a brand new woodwind library, and it's a biggie. The Cinematic Studio series has proved to be one of the most highly regarded orchestral libraries on the market, with plaudits of both the sound, beautiful legato transitions, simple interface, and some generous loyalty pricing. Well, the eagerly awaited next installment is now here in the form of Cinematic Studio Woodwinds. And if the length of a thread on a certain forum is anything to go by, it's arguably the most talked about woodwind library we've ever seen, and that was before it was released. It features a range of ensemble and solo instruments playing every main articulation a modern composer would require, all accessible via the beautifully concise and usable contact engine that founder Alex Warbank is known for. The question on everyone's lips is, can it live up to the incredibly high standards of both the strings and the brass? Well, without further ado, let's dive in and see if it can. Cinematic Studio Woodwinds downloads as a pretty hefty 105 gigabytes of content across 4 ensembles and 9 solo instruments. There are 11 articulations with vibrato options for the long notes. There's 3 legato transition speeds and 4 mics: close, overhead, main and room. It works with the free contact player 5.8.1 and above, and normally sells for $399, but if you own any of their other products, there are some extremely good loyalty discounts available. We'll start here with the 2 bassoon patch before moving on and showing you every single instrument that's available in this collection. We'll spend a bit more time on the bassoons though, just so I can show you a little bit more about the interface. We won't be going into every single articulation for every single instrument, because that would just take forever, but we'll go through as much as we possibly can in the time we've got available. Now, those who are familiar with the strings and the brass will be really at home here with the layout, which is for me one of the best orchestral GUIs out there. It just makes it so easy to get into, even if you haven't seen the or played with any of the Cinematic Studio series instruments before. It's a real doddle. In the middle here are all the articulations. We've got 6 displayed, but mostly only 5 are used because the flutter is not applicable for some of the instruments. Clicking on them chooses them, as you would expect, and to the top left we have the key switch. Now if we shift click on the articulation, we get the chance to choose our key switch as well. And also by clicking the articulation, you can see on the right hand side the parameters that relate to it for the specific variabilities in it are displayed. So with staccato, we've got the different types of staccato. For staccato, we've got staccato overlay and the legato switch, etc., etc. The cog here displays the preferences. We've got some reverb, which is external to the actual natural mics here. And you can see that all of them are deactivated at the moment, and we've just got them mixed. This is the default patch, and it's a really lovely blend of all the mics, which is kind of baked in. This really helps keep your RAM down. However, of course, if you want to kind of go into detail and craft your own mix, that's dead easy to do. We'll do that, or maybe looking at the flute, so we're not always listening to the bassoon all the way through. But for the bassoon, I will take you through all the different patches, and you can see a little bit more about how it sounds. I've chosen this basically because I'm bass player and I love low stuff, and also the woody tone in this is particularly beautiful. So I'll have a little jam on some legato stuff. Watch out for this legato speed as it changes according to the velocity played. And I'll also chuck in the odd repeat note as well, so by holding the sustain pedal down we get a really nice kind of round robin repeat, which sounds very natural indeed. The dynamic range on this is just sublime. We've got a huge dynamic range, and I love the way it kind of fades out to pretty much nothing there. Now, you'll have seen the legato speed change, and that's according to the velocities, and this gives a really nice emotional and realistic quality to your playing, because it kind of goes with how you're playing. Often if you're playing fast stuff, you'll be pressing probably a bit harder on the keys, and that makes the playing kind of replicate how a real player would do it, which is exactly what we want. I also love in particular, and we'll be able to tell this, especially when we listen to some of the other articulations, the noise of the keys, which is picked up. Lovely little touches like that, which are just fantastic to hear. Now we'll have a little look at the staccatos. By clicking this, we give access to the 4 different types of shorts available in the collection. Now, I love the way the mod wheel dictates these. It makes it easier to change them on the fly. I'll play a few little bits and I'll have a little chat about the differences between them. Again, lovely dynamics. The repetitions you'll hear, if I just play one, it almost gates off towards the end, and that's to allow for some real speedy playing without getting this overhanging constant release. At the end of a phrase, you can switch the staccatismo or staccato or even the sforzando for that nice release. See what I mean? That kind of thing. And yeah, it just works great. They're really quite snappy. I like them. Trills. I played simply by either hitting the minor second or the major second. There we can hear that key clicking. Lovely. By taking the legato off, I'll leave the mod where it is and play with both hands. We can get a polyphonic version of a trill. The Mercato. Oh, let's switch the legato back on there. It's a little bit of a pumped up sustain really, and really good for more exciting passages. We've got a bit more, maybe got a triple F at the top, maybe. Really good for runs as well. There's no designated kind of run patch builder or anything like this in it, but the Mercatos do a fantastic job of that. They have a spiccato overlay as well, which gives you a snappier attack. I'll take that off and play a little bit, and I'll just ride the mod wheel up a little bit as I go. Just gives a bit of bite to it. Now it is controlled by velocity. It doesn't have a separate volume control, which might be quite nice addition at some point, who knows. But it is controllable by the velocity. Now when I take it off, the Mercatos surrender all control to the mod wheel. I'm playing quite light and then quite hard then. It's not really changing the sound too much apart from when I move the mod wheel. By putting the spiccatos on, we do get some control. That's slightly different to the strings, where the Mercato, even without spiccato on, does give some degree of control to the dynamics. I'd quite like that. It might come in an update, who knows. I mean, it works great as it is, but that might just give a bit more usability to it. And obviously we could take legato off and kind of and play polyphonically. Beautiful. So the last thing to look at is really the measured trems here. Now, I guess in the absence of any specific double tongue, triple tongue type of articulation, this might be the closest you get to it. And it syncs to host, so whatever you've got on your DAW is going to be playing exactly the same tempo as it in here. Now, it's worth having a quick look at the preferences here. Now, we've got a key switcher, which is CC58, so any of your key switching can also be done by CC58. It can kind of do all of them. I think I've got it configured. Just let me have a look. Yeah, so I'm riding that key switch, that fader that I've got assigned to CC58 up and down, and it kind of takes you through every single different parameter, as you can see there. So if you need to do any complex key switching, should I say, this can really come in. It's definitely helped me on the strings. I haven't used it enough on the woodwind yet to figure out if that's a thing, but it does work very nicely. Now we've got velocity crossfade here. Which is by default assigned to CC1, but you can change that if you would like. The vibrato on and off is CC2 as well. So it's a fairly subtle vibrato. It's not doing anything too crazy, but it's either on or off with simply a fade from one version to the other, which is pretty decent. I kind of quite like that. And the CC11 as well. Now, I'm not always playing with CC11 and 1, but it does make quite a nice difference to just using CC1. If you want it to be a bit more dramatic, yeah, get that expression fading in there as well. Onto the clarinets now. And they have a special place in my heart, the clarinet, I think. It's the first instrument I ever learned. Well, after I brought a violin home and then was told to take it back because it made too much of a screechy, horrible noise, apparently. So, yeah, I first learned music on a clarinet and I haven't played it for God knows how many years. So it's quite nice to always dive into clarinets. Anyway, that's by the by. Let's have a quick listen. Them softest ones are so nice. Yeah, love it. Okay, again, we've got the legato speed here, which just does such wondrous things to your playing. Now, it's worth pointing out that you do need to do a bit of MIDI shuffling after you've played in your piece. And also because we've got a little bit of a delay on the slowest one as well, it's not always going to be that easy to play in bang on time. But trust me, it's worth the fiddle because it sounds great. So when we're playing our slower legato, we've got a 220 millisecond delay, so you need to put your MIDI forward to that amount. For the middle range, it's 130 milliseconds. For the very fastest legato, it's 90 milliseconds, which is pretty much instantaneous, really. The medium and the fast are kind of interchangeable and similar-ish. The slow is for those real romantic-y kind of uber emotional type of passages that you might want to play. I'll try do a little demo. I'm going to stick the mod wheel at a kind of set point, and then I'm going to go between two notes. I'll do an octave, right? And I'll try, bear with me as I try to get the velocities bang on for the different legatos, just so you can really hear the difference between the legato speeds. Okay, so we're just going to go E to E. So you get an idea there. It's not night and day, but it's enough that when we start combining these in a piece and using all the different types of legato, it just gives that added extra realism. And again, like the bassoons, you can hear some of them key clicks, which I just think is a real lovely thing. We've got the staccatos here, and it's worth mentioning that all of the instruments share the same layout of short articulations across the mod wheel, making it a real breeze to get around. On the finishing note there, you probably want to actually go to that. So if I was programming it in, I'd kind of play that and then switched on the final one to staccatissimo, so we get that nice ring out. Yeah, definitely there's a lot of vibrancy and delicacy with those shorts there. Beautiful stuff. The trills. Super realistic. Measured repetitions. Let's sing to hoarse because I'm on 120 on my DAW, so it's a bit easier to play within 180. Plus you can hear that second note a bit clearer. And the maccatos. And of course, going back to the sustained, we don't have to always have it on legato. We've got a that's where playing pads. The attack and release, yeah, I kind of stick them where they are there. Any much longer on the release, it kind of sounds a bit unnatural. Yeah, around there, and the attack, basically what they've got there always sounds pretty nice to me. Now, it's worth having a quick look at the reverb. So this is a kind of extra on top of whatever you've got going on with the mics. If you want a bit more sort of epic haul. Personally, I will just use some third-party reverb if I need it, really. But it's there if you want it, so really handy. And again, we've got preferences. No vibrato on the clarinets, of course. But yeah, any of these can be easily changed just by clicking and selecting a different CC. We'll have a look at a couple of the mic options. So the mic options are a little bit different compared to the strings and the brass in terms of having an overhead mic. This is a kind of typical thing which will be used in orchestral setups, and with them sitting a bit different place further back from the orchestra, the overhead mic brings that to the fore a little bit more, if you like. Now, what I'll do is I'll play, let's try it on, we'll just try it on like staccatissimo, and just so you can hear, on the shorts it's a bit easier to kind of hear exactly what's going on with the different mics, I think. So with the close, it's worth pointing out also that everything in here is orchestral seating, but it's possible to change where you want them positioned if you're doing something a bit more kind of avant-garde or a bit more contemporary and you want things in a different place, just by using these sliders here to kind of go left or right, and then sort of Apple click will center that back for you. Close, very immediate, really in your face. The overhead. The main. Now, it's worth pointing out here that with the strings especially, I use the strings a lot, so I talk about them a lot more than the brass. But yeah, with the strings, the main mic, which is kind of Decca tree, that is your main mic in terms of, that's probably the one you're going to use most of, and then bring these other ones in. Now, by contrast, I'd argue that the Woodwinds is a little bit the opposite in terms of the main mic here. It sounds beautiful, but it's a little bit more roomy than what it is, probably because of where the strings are within the room. Sorry, where the Woodwinds are within the room. Now, if you just contrast to the overhead, and the main, you can see the difference there. It's quite profound, really. Now, the room, I'll put this a bit louder, is where you capture all the ambience of what's going on. I'm not sure how many mics they use for this or anything like that, but kind of capture the air of the room, if you like. And in contrast to the main, you can hear there definitely the room is given a far more ambient feel. It's also a lot wider. You know, the stereo spread there is far greater than the main. So they all have something to give you, you know. You've got your overhead, which I would kind of build everything around by default if you want a kind of conventional sound, you know. So have the overhead kind of high up, the main probably next one in there, then also the room to taste, really. You can get away without any room sound. It sounds fine, and obviously that's how wet you'd like it in many respects. And the close is, again, bringing everything more into focus. Just gives that little bit of definition. The one mic that I found hard to kind of live without is the overhead mic, you know. Let's bring it out and see what happens to the mix there. try the sustains here. And bring the overhead in. It just brings something to the pie that I really quite like. But you can dial it down if you want some of the woodwinds to not be as kind of, prevalent in the mix. You've got it there. Now, I have to say, none of this is an amazingly, hugely wet sound, such you might hear from other libraries, which does make it exceptionally easy to blend with existing templates you might have. But also, obviously, it works fantastic with the growing, nearly complete, we're just waiting for the percussion, Cinematic Studio series. The mix, though, is where it's at. And, from experience on the strings, the mix has found its way into loads of my cues just as it is, because it just sounds great. We're on to the flutes, and it's worth pointing out at this stage that all the groups in Cinematic Studio Woodwinds are pairs, so there's no A3s. A number of potential reasons for this. One may be that it gives a bit more flexibility, and that if we did need an A3, we can just add a soloist. And also the fact that with an A2, we can create a divisi by duplicating the pair and using a little transposition trick, which I'll quickly show you here by tuning up there, hitting this, and then bringing the MIDI transpose down by 2. Still sounds good, but we're actually accessing a whole different bunch of samples. Now I'll just put this back to where we were. And it's a good option to avoid sort of phasing and to make it sound like we actually do have some divisi playing going on. So that's probably the reason behind the A2s. I think they sound great, and I don't really hanker for an A3. If I need a thicker sound, we'll just add in a soloist, and it's not the perfect solution, but it works really well. Otherwise, the size of this library could potentially just get out of hand if you're having A3s and A2s. It's already fairly big, actually. It's worth noting, 105 gigabytes, so make sure you've got plenty of space on your hard drive before you download it. So, without further ado, we'll have a little mess on with the sustains on the flutes. Now, I think what I'll try and do on this is employ some of the vibrato as well. And expression. So I'll kind of move 3 faders around as I'm kind of going. I'll just show you the vibrato, because especially in the flutes, it's quite marked, and the blend from non-vib to vib is pretty nicely done, actually. Some good degree of control and a fairly smooth transition there. And the vibrato is just the right side of the line for me personally as well. Not too much, not too little. In many ways, like the kind of ambience of the mics as well. It's that Goldilocks zone of not being too wet or too overdone, but also not being too dry and maybe too boring as well. I'll play a little loud with the flutes. Like I said, I'll use all 3 expression, CC1 and some vibrato to try and get as much movement in as I possibly can. I'll add a few notes in with a sustain down as well, so you can hear that repeated note trigger as well. not amazingly easy to do using all three at once. Typically, I would actually be playing in with maybe just CC11 and the mod wheel, and then bring in that vibrato when I want it. But, I just wanted to give you a little taste of what it could be capable of. And again, this legato speed thing. So beautifully done with the flutes. Staccatos. Nice, bright, bobbing around, dancing around, just as you want them. Now, the flutters. Yes, we can at last use that sixth articulation. Let's have a go. I really like them. Very nice indeed. Measured reps, really nice. Like them a lot. And the Mikado. My piano player's not amazing, but you get the idea of it can do quick, sure thing. It can do runs, And I think there's some great run libraries out there. I often use them in combination with a Mikado on the strings, that is, as well. I haven't tried it on the woodwinds yet, but on the strings, the Mikado of this with a dedicated runs library, and that works real nice. But they can hold their own with a run, for sure. The spiccato overlay gives a bit of a bit of sparkle to it. Those flutes are really special. Now, with the Mikado legato, I believe it's a 60 millisecond, or at least it's similar to the fast on the sustains. So if you're bringing the MIDI back, aim for between sort of 60 and 90 milliseconds, and you'll get it right on the Mikado. The Mikado doesn't have the variable legato functionality, so that's one thing to remember. And also the other thing is, when I'm talking about sort of MIDI delays and fun things like that, the manual does also dictate that the shorts have a 60 millisecond delay as well. This just gives a little bit of front edge to the sound, which adds a little bit of realism. So once you've played it in, shove them back so they start 60 milliseconds before where you would like to hear the beat, and that kind of puts it on the point of the intensity of the sound will hit on the beat. But you do get that little air, that little bit of nice attack to the sound. So they've kept that in intentionally. That's the idea. Right, so this is going to take forever unless we move on. It's such fun going through this stuff. I will try to be more concise as we move on and look at the rest of the instruments, starting with the oboes. Again, a pair of oboes. That's a great sound, and I'm kind of now just expecting it to sound great, and forgetting that it's not easy to do that, to record something and to put it into an interface and have it sound so beautiful as that does. So let's have a quick little mini focus on the repetition note thing, which is a real nice feature of this library, where if we hold the sustain pedal down, we can get a repeated note for the sustain. So I'll do it with and without. Let's go for a nice middle of the ground range here. That's without me doing anything with the sustain pedal. Now if I did the sustain pedal down, you can see we get that much more natural repetition of the note. And again, I'll play a little bit higher up and just give a quick A-B for that. Sublime, for sure. Right, I'm not going to go through every single articulation from now on in, because we will be here forever, but I'll just pick a few little choice ones out. I'll just dial, we'll go back to the mix here and let's try it on the measured trems and let's have a little play with the mics just briefly. Let's bring them all in. Let's take the overhead down. As you can see there, it's a fair chunk of gigabytes as well. So one thing I do quite often as well is update the sample pool. I will do it now because I'll have to start loading samples in as I go. But once you played a section and you know those notes are what you want to play for that, update your sample pool afterwards. And then what it'll do is it'll take out all the samples that weren't played in that section, and you will be stunned at how much it can bring down the amount of RAM needed. So it just means that you're not loading into RAM all the articulations, and especially the legato transitions and such like, and all the various round robins that are just simply not required for the piece you're playing. Right, so let's bring the overheads up, let's bring the close down. Let's kind of go for overhead and room vibe. And then let's do the opposite, just so you can get an idea about how the sound can be configured, a bit different. You know, it does have a whole lot between these four, a whole lot of different, space options available to you. We can go for like a room. Let's take these off, get rid of them, and just go for a kind of ultra room sound. You can do whatever you want. It's real fun. And again, yeah, as I mentioned before, we've got the panning here. So if you need to put them in a particular place, easy enough to do. Oh, and that's a good point. It's worth pointing this out. I think I've been through pretty much everything. Probably some I've forgotten, as is life. But clicking these here means we can define which output they're going to be coming to. So they have to be on, obviously, to do that. And I haven't got all my outputs configured in Contrabassoon here, but if you did, you could possibly put them on each different output. The basic result being that if you wanted to record down as audio the separate mics and then have control of that within your DAW afterwards, maybe to put different effects or different treatments on different mics, that is easily achievable. Not something I do every day because it's kind of becomes a fairly intense process in a big orchestration. But, if the need is there, the ability is there to do it as well. We'll have a look at some of the solo instruments now. There are 4 that correspond to the ensemble pairs we've already looked at, but there's also quite a lot more which deal with the more unusual members of the woodwind family, such as the alto flute here. It's also worth noting that although at the moment it doesn't have an ensemble patch as part of the collection, one will be coming very quickly, which is going to be a great tool for sketching out your broad ideas of where you want your woodwinds to be, maybe using both hands across a range of octaves, and then being able to use that as a template almost to break it down into individual components. So I'll just have a little jam here on the sustain patch. I'm not using the vibrato fader all there. It's got maximum vibrato and it's quite strong on that instrument in particular, but I think it only adds to the emotional, expressive quality of it. Some beautiful low tones there that always give me a kind of feeling of a woodland fantasy, something like that. Right, let's have a little look at some of the staccatos. Really nicely done. Because it's a flute, we've got a flutter patch as well. And some staccato here. We've also, of course, got this option to put the spick on as well. A handy feature if we want to get really detailed about the key switching is that for some of the articulations at least, the velocity has an impact on how kind of detailed they are. So if we look at the staccato here, a harder press takes the spiccato overlay on, and a soft press, the low velocity, takes it off. Similarly, we can have the same for the sustains here. So if we go to a hard press and a soft press, takes us between either having a fully sustained or just legato. And in much the same way, we have the same for the staccato as well. Harder press, and the lower velocities then will take it down all the way to repetitions, which can be useful if you're the type of programmer and composer that likes to have one instrument on the entire track and do lots of key switching, so we're not having multiple tracks just dedicated to the same instrument. This makes it hugely flexible, and it's a real nice extra workflow thing to have should you require it. Going to get down and dirty here with the solo bass clarinet. Oh yeah, that's deep. That's real deep. See how we handle some of these bad boys. Yeah, it works. And that's one great thing about the cinematic Studio Woodwinds is that it's just that consistency, that you can play any patch and you kind of know it's going to sound great, it's going to be quite balanced, and it's going to be more or less how you expect it and of an exceptionally high quality. And much of this is down to the perfectionism in terms of the recording and the programming of it that is inherent in the company. And apparently took them over 200 studio hours of time to record all these parts with, I imagine, some incredibly patient and amazing players as well involved. And it's this consistency that is a real trademark of this, not just this library, but all of the stuff that Cinematic Studio series guys do, in that we can, if you kind of want to lay your violins with your flutes, you can drag that MIDI patch down, put it with your flutes on the same patch, probably the same key switches, I think, and also it'll just play and it'll sound great. You might have to do a little bit of fiddling, of course, but there's a kind of modular approach to these which makes them fit together really well, and there's no real surprises apart from the fact that it just sounds amazing. Right, some trills. Add a bit of room into that. Just do a quick bit of overhead and room. It's just so powerful, that. Let's move on to the next instrument. Possibly my favourite instrument in the whole library, the solo bassoon. Oh yes, it's big and beautiful. And I was using quite a few of the repeat notes there. There's 3 round robins of each of those. A quick blast on the staccatos. Yep, as expected. Sounds nice. Sounds better than nice, sounds great. Yeah, trills. Kind of high for the bassoon, but you know, it holds its own pretty nicely. And a little bit measured trem. Let's sing to host, so I'm not going crazy speeds. Yes, very nice indeed. That's a beautiful patch, and especially for solo lines, that sustained legato, that's the one right there. So this is the bit where I can live out the fantasy of if I hadn't given up playing clarinet. This is what I might have sounded like. Here we go. I think I'll end up writing so much stuff now, you know, velocities, because these sound so great down there in the pianissimo type of territory. The stacks. Just incredibly agile, like so many of the other Maccato patches on the other instruments. We're going to go super low now with the solo Contrabassoon. Wow, that is pretty full on. See how these are like down there. Oh yeah. Now that's a good sign that we can have something that's so crazy low as the contrabassoon, and it can handle pretty quick lines as well. Not that you're probably going to play loads of quick stuff with them, but who knows? And it's nice to know it's there, you know. Let's have a little go on these. Measure repetitions. Great stuff. It's worth having a little chat about the tonality of the room and the style that this whole series comes from, and it's definitely geared more towards film score type of stuff. So it was recorded at the Trackdown studio in Sydney, which is predominantly for recording TV and film scores, as opposed to being more of a classical recording using a big hall. So for those that are working predominantly for film and TV and maybe ads and trailers and stuff like that, that require that film score, Hollywoody type of sound, this is very much geared towards that, as opposed to something which is to try create a classical sounding type of ambience. I've loaded up here both the solo oboe and the solo cor anglais just to compare and contrast. They're very similar types of instruments, but they do have distinct differences in the tonality. Let's start with the oboe. Beautifully clear and bright, the anglais. Distinctly more warmer, woodier, more pastoral type of sound, I think. It's also panned quite a bit to the right, really, compared to the oboe. That retonguing repetition is really sweet. Stacks on the cor anglais. Yeah, I think the addition of the cor anglais is really great because them oboes are lovely, but the oboe can be quite a piercing sound, and sometimes you want something a little bit more gentle. Oops. Helps if I'm on the right articulation there. And while we're here, we might as well play a couple of them together. Both really nice and complement each other supremely. Of course, no woodwind library would be complete without those piercing high notes of the solo piccolo. Well, it's definitely got that piercing thing nailed, for sure. Laid with the flute, an octave up, that's going to sound really spectacular. Let's have a look at how it handles quicker stuff. Yep, that does the trick for sure. Towards the top, the tuning is very, very slightly, maybe not quite on it, but it's a thing that they did by intention, really, to not overcorrect the tuning. So the sample developers decided that it's better to have a little bit of that naturalism in there, and it's easy enough for them to go ahead and use autotune and make it all kind of perfect. But often within an arrangement, having that a few notes where it's maybe, a few cents not quite in the right place actually only makes it sound kind of thicker and more real, So I applaud them for doing that, and I don't think it's a major deal at all that not everything is absolutely perfectly tuned. I'll have a quick look at the stacks. There, right on the money. Flutter tongue. Here we go. Beautifully done. It's worth maybe mentioning at this point that although we have an amazing amount of articulation and pretty much 90% of stuff that you're going to want to use, it's not as comprehensive as some of the competitors, which may or may not be a deciding factor in if this is the right thing for you. So we don't have some of the extended techniques such as overblown or harmonics. I don't miss them that much, not the type of thing that's typically used that much, but just something to mention and to bear in mind. The main thing to say at this point is, congratulations on getting this far and what is a truly epic review. It's possibly the longest one I'll ever have to do, but this is a big product, not just in terms of how many instruments they are, but also in terms of how important it is to the composer community and how much it's been anticipated. It's also not an insignificant purchase in terms of the financial value in it, and we really hope that this will give you a good idea about whether it's something that's really suitable for you and that you can add into your current setup. And if you've already bought it, hopefully along the way you might have learned a few new functionality, tips and tricks about the product itself. So without further ado, let's dive into the solo flute, which is the last instrument to look at. And I've also done something a bit different here, and I've laid it up with the flute pair. First of all though, let's have a little listen to the solo flute just by itself. Beautifully clear, airy, and everything you want a flute to be. The shorts. Those fossandos are really great, them. Awesome. and the flutter. The maccato for a bit of passion, action, intensity, call it what you will. Just as nimble as all the others in the maccato setup there. Absolutely brilliant. And a few trills. Oh yes. Perfecto. So, we're going to have a little play with it in combination with the flute pair below. This is in a way to give you an idea of what an A3 setup may be like. We talked a little bit before about how Cinematic Studio Woodwinds only deals in pairings of instruments instead of threes. And in many ways, this does give a bit more flexibility to the setup. By combining the solo flute with the twos, we can get an A3 sort of pairing an A3 grouping. And what I've done is set up the mic mix slightly different for the solo flute compared to the flute ensemble here, which is just using the normal mix. Now the solo flute is a lot more close, overhead is still pretty prevalent, the main and the room are a lot further down, and the idea being that I kind of was imagining this section of three flutes playing with maybe a spot mic on one of the players, as if they're the kind of lead of the group, if you like. But in essence, what we're going to be listening to is three flutes together. And this is where the consistency in how the libraries are set up in terms of everything matching, the sustains matching, the legato speeds matching, the key switching matching, it really makes layering them up and playing them together in this manner a real breeze. If I just do the A2s there. And then just the solos. And then both together for that thicker sound. And it just gives that more epic, I say epic, it's not always the best description of this type of thing, but a bigger, deeper, richer tonality to the sound, which I really like, and it does work fantastic for this. I'll play a little bit more just to give you an idea. Highs and lows and a few of the sustained retongings involved as well. And if we switch the staccatos, the shorts, and again, yeah, this matching between them comes into its own here. So a bit quicker. Quite simply, beautiful. It's just a real nice blend, that. I really do like it. Have a quick, one last little comparison. Yep. And then in. The saying that good things come to those who wait is entirely appropriate to cinematic Studio Woodwinds. Whilst Alex Warbank might not be the most prolific and speedy orchestral sample developer out there, him and his team more than make up for it in the quality and thoroughness of their products. The question always was, as I said at the beginning, can it live up to the incredibly high standards already set by the strings and the brass? And can it compete with the already stellar options from other orchestral big hitters? Well, for me, the answer is a definite yes, and arguably it could be the new king of woodwinds that all others will be judged against. Both in terms of the sound and the interface, it sticks perfectly with the other Cinematic Studio series sections, yet it can also work well alongside other libraries too, as the mic options give a high degree of flexibility for blending with existing orchestral templates. The sonic beauty at its core is supported by a supreme consistency across a wide range of articulations from a comprehensive number of group and solo instruments. And this is where the success of Cinematic Studio Woodwinds really does lie. It's that incredible sound married with peerless usability, which for me results in playing it with an ever-growing smile on my face. The ability to get such emotion merely using a MIDI keyboard and some samples on your hard drive continues to amaze me as a composer. And this library is a shining example of just that. I hope you enjoyed this review of Cinematic Studio Woodwinds. Let us know below what you thought about it and if it lived up to your own expectations. Please like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also be sure to check the main sample library review website for loads more interviews, features and Don's special tips to get the best deals.